Welcome back. Let's move into cheese. Mm. And we're starting with the headline act, Époisses. If you've never encountered it before, here's what you need to know. This is a soft, wash-rind cow's milk cheese with an orange to brick red crust, sold in a little circular wooden box. It is one of the most assertive aromas of any cheese you'll ever come across. The crust is washed in marc de Bourgogne, a Burgundian grape spirit, which gives it that distinct pungency and depth of flavour. Brilliant Savant, the man who arguably knew more about good food than anyone in the 19th century in France, called it the king of cheeses. Napoleon was famously devoted to it, and at its peak in the early 1800s, more than 300 farms across the region were producing it. It is in every sense a very serious cheese. And yet Époisses almost disappeared entirely. The two world wars drained the region of the men who worked the farms. And by 1950, production had virtually ceased. The knowledge of how to make it properly was fading, held only by a dwindling number of people who still remembered the traditional method. And then in 1956, a Burgundian farming couple, Robert and Simone Berthold, decided that they weren't going to let it go. They tracked down those who still knew how to make it, gathered that knowledge together, and relaunched Époisses from scratch. Without them, it would almost certainly have been lost forever. It received its AOC status in 1991, and production has been growing ever since. It's one of my favourite stories in French food, an entire cheese saved by two people who simply refused to give up on it. Next is a cheese with a story that is rather different from most. Abbey de Citeaux is made by Cistercian monks at the Abbey de Citeaux in the Côte d'Or, one of the most historical significant abbeys in all of France. Founded in 1098 and the birthplace of the entire Cistercian order, the monks have been farming and the land around the abbey for centuries. It's a pressed, uncooked cheese somewhere in the family of a reblochon, mild, creamy, and gentle, aged for 3 weeks in the abbey cellars. The abbey has a shop where visitors can pick up Citeaux directly from the monks who made it. There's something wonderful about buying a cheese at the source, in the shadow of a 12th century abbey, knowing it was made a few hundred metres from where you're standing. If you're planning a trip to Burgundy, put it on your list. It's about 20 minutes from Bourgogne. It's open to visitors, and the cheese is absolutely worth the detour. You might recognize the Charolais name from the cattle that we talked about earlier, but Burgundy also produces a Charolais cheese, and it's quite different. This is actually a raw goat's milk cheese from the hills of the Charolais, with a soft paste and a natural crust that starts out beige and ivory when young, but develops blue-grey tones as it ages. It's one of the larger goat cheeses that you'll find in France, and the flavour deepens considerably depending on how long it's been aged. From fresh and mild at a few weeks to something much more complex and assertive after a few months. Goat farming in this corner of Burgundy dates back to the 16th century, where it grew alongside cattle farming as a way of making the most out of the land and supplementing farm income. This cheese received its AOC designation in 2010, making it the 46th French cheese to earn that protection, and best enjoyed, if you're asking me, somewhere between April and November, when it's at its peak. While we're still in the south of Burgundy, there's one more goat's cheese worthy of note, and that's the Maconnais, named after the Maconnais region surrounding the town of Mâcon. This is a tiny, delicate little raw goat's milk cheese again, weighing somewhere between 30 and 40 grams, which makes it one of the smallest AOC cheeses in France. It goes by a few names, Caboron, Chevreton, the Maconnais, but my favourite is the unofficial nickname, Bouton de Coulette, which translates rather wonderfully as trouser button, which, when you see one, is exactly what it looks like. It's been protected by the PTO since 2010, and like the Charolais, it is best between spring and early autumn. It's small enough to eat in a couple of bites, just the kind of thing that turns up on a cheese board in this part of France and quietly steals the show. Now, Pain d'épices. If you've been listening for a while, you'll know I've done a full episode on this one. So go back and find that if you want to complete the story. But I couldn't talk about Burgundy's food without mentioning it because, well, Dijon is the undisputed capital of pain d'épices and it belongs there. This is spiced honey cake fragrant with anise, cinnamon and coriander, and it's been part of the fabric of the city for centuries. What most people don't realize is that it didn't originate in France at all. It came from China, traveling west along trade routes, arriving in Burgundy in the 14th century, when Margaret of Flanders, wife of Duke Philip the Bold, brought her love of a honey and wheat flour cake called the bouchette to Dijon and made it fashionable at court. An exotic import that Burgundy quietly adopted, refined, and eventually made entirely its own. The one name that you need to know when it comes to Dijon pain d'épices is Moulin et Petitjean. This family business has been making it since 1796, surviving revolutions, wars, and the industrialization of the entire food industry. Today, they are the last remaining artisan pain d'épices makers in the city. I actually took my very first tour group to there, which felt like the right place to start. I'd arranged an interpreter to be there to talk to us about the history of the place, which in theory was a wonderful idea. We arrived, we were greeted by this lovely lady, who, it very quickly became apparent, did not speak a single word of English. Not one. And this was before the days of Google Translate. So I did what any sensible person would do in that situation. I turned to my husband and said, "Right, you're doing this." He was thrilled, as you can imagine. And despite the slight language barrier, it remains one of my favorite visits because, well, the shop alone is worth the trip. Just walking in and smelling the place is an experience in itself. And if you want a little piece of Burgundy to take home with you, a wrapped loaf of Moulin et Petitjean pain d'épices is, I would argue, one of the finest edible souvenirs in all of France. And while we're on the subject of pain d'épices, there's a little relation worth mentioning, the nonette. These are small, round, spiced gingerbread cakes that are filled with orange marmalade and finished with a light honey glaze. And the name comes from the nuns, who made them in monasteries throughout Burgundy during the Middle Ages. What I love about the origin story is that they are essentially the original travel stack. Nuns would sell them to passengers on stagecoaches passing through, and later to train travellers, which means that for centuries, people were eating these little spiced cakes on the go without giving much thought to the fact that they were actually eating something with a history stretching back to medieval monasteries. Nobles and princes were so fond of them that they had them shipped regularly, and they became a fixture of the French court. Today, the Dijon version, which allows for blackcurrant and apricot fillings alongside traditional orange one, is the one that you're most likely to find. They are very easy to eat, several without even noticing. And here's one that anyone who has travelled through France will almost certainly recognize without necessarily knowing that they were eating. Anis de Flavigny. Those little oval tins, each one showing a shepherd offering sweets to a young girl, that turn up in gift shops, service stations, and market stalls all across the country. Inside, they're small, perfectly round anise candies, each one built up over 15 days from a single green anise seed, coated in layer upon layer of flavoured sugared syrup. A process so slow and precise that a seed weighing 2 milligrams becomes a 1 gram candy through pure patience. They've been made this way since 1591 in the village of Flavigny-sur-Ozeran, one of the most beautiful villages in Burgundy, originally by Benedictine monks at the abbey there. And the same family company, the Troubat House, has been producing them at the same site since 1923. Louis XIV had a box of them. They were the first sweets ever sold in French vending machines in the 1930s, and they're now sold in 45 countries. The current owner advises taking them in pairs and letting them melt in your mouth rather than chewing them, which I think is very excellent life advice in general. Now, before we talk about the Kia, we need to talk about what goes into it, and that means Crème de Cassis. This is a rich, deep blackcurrant liqueur, blood red in color, made by macerating blackcurrant berries in alcohol with added sugar. And it is one of Burgundy's most important liquid exports, arguably. The modern recipe was developed in Dijon in 1841 by a coffee maker named Auguste Denis Lagoutte, and the region has been producing it on a serious scale ever since. Today, the Cassis de Dijon appellation alone accounts for 80% of all blackcurrant cream production in France, half of which goes to export. It's worth noting that not all crème de cassis is equal. The quality depends entirely on the variety of the blackcurrant, the concentration of the fruit, and the care taken to produce it. So if you're buying a bottle, look for Cassis de Bourgogne on the label, and then you'll know that you're in good hands. And so now the Kia. And again, I've done a full episode on this one with the wonderful Tanisha Townsend. So go back and find that for full story. But briefly, the Kia is simply crème de cassis mixed with white Burgundy wine. And it's the aperitif of Burgundy. It's named after Canon Felix Kia, the most famous, colourful mayor of Dijon, who served it at every municipal reception from 1945 until his death, and promoted it so relentlessly that by 1952 his name had been officially trademarked. The drink itself actually predates him. A cafe waiter in Dijon is thought to have invented it in 1904 as a way of improving an ordinary white wine. But Canon Kia understood the power of a good story and a consistent brand, and the rest is history. The Kia Royale swaps the white wine for Crème de Bourgogne. And finally, one you may not have heard about, but which quietly appears throughout this episode, Marc de Bourgogne. This is a grape brandy made by distilling what remains after the grapes have been pressed, the skins, seeds, and the stems, in traditional copper pot stills. It has its own AOC status, must be aged in oak barrels for a minimum of 2 years, and has a character that is earthy, slightly spicy, and unmistakably Burgundian. It's the spirit that's used to wash the rind of the Époisses cheese, which is what gives the cheese its distinctive depth and pungency. It also turns up in cooking marinades and the occasional cocktail. It's the kind of ingredient that works mostly behind the scenes. Before we finish, I want to talk about the people who have cooked in this region, because Burgundy's culinary history isn't just about the ingredients and dishes. It's about the chefs who shaped how France eats. And the list, when you look at it properly, is genuinely extraordinary. From a man who quietly rewrote the rules of French cuisine in the 17th century, to the tragic story of a 3-star chef whose life became the inspiration for one of the most beloved films ever made. Burgundy has produced and nurtured some of the most important culinary figures in history. This is a region that takes its food seriously, and the chefs it has produced reflect that entirely. We start in the 17th century with a man born right here in Dijon, who most people have never heard of, and yet his influence on French cuisine is almost impossible to overstate. François Pierre de la Varenne. And in 1653, he published a book called La Cuisine Française that changed everything. Before La Varenne, French cooking was still largely medieval in character, heavy with exotic spices, sweet and sour combinations, sugar in savory dishes, and lard in everything. La Varenne swept most of all of that away. He replaced exotic spices with local herbs, parsley, thyme, bay leaf, and tarragon. He banned sugar from savory cooking entirely, and he replaced lard with butter. He introduced vegetables like cauliflower, asparagus, and peas to the French table. He invented the bouquet garni. He wrote the first recipe that foreshadows hollandaise sauce, and his book went through around 250 editions and was the first French cookbook ever translated into English. Now, here's a name that deserves to be far more widely known than it is. Alexandre Dumas was born in Dijon in Burgundy in 1895. And in 1932, he took over a modest inn in the small town of Soleure, right on the old National Road number 6, the route everyone took between Paris and the south of France. Within 3 years, he had his third Michelin star, and for the next 3 decades, he held it, becoming recognized alongside Fernand Point and André Peck as one of the three great chefs of this era. His guest book reads like a casting call for the 20th century. Hemingway, Charlie Chaplin, Vivian Leigh, Gary Cooper, Salvador Dali, Edith Piaf, Orson Welles, the King of Spain. Kononsky, the most influential food critic in France, essentially made the restaurant La Côte d'Or his headquarters. Demin was nicknamed the Magnificent, the King of Cooks, and the Cook of Kings. Most people coming to Burgundy today know La Côte d'Or only as the Relais Bernard Loisy. But the story of that building starts with Demin, and it's worth knowing his name. I've done a full episode on this extraordinary woman, so go back and find that complete story. But I couldn't talk about the great chefs connected to this region without mentioning her. Eugène Brazier was born on a poor farm just south of Bresse, on the edge of the Burgundy countryside in 1895. She grew up in poverty, lost her mother at 10, was thrown out by her father at 19, and arrived in Lyon with, well, nothing. By 1933, she was the first chef in history, man or woman, to hold 3 Michelin stars across 2 restaurants simultaneously, a feat that wouldn't be repeated for over 60 years. A farm girl from the edge of Burgundy who became the most decorated chef in the world. Marvelous. And now we come to the story that I think will stay with you the longest from this episode. And I want to tell it carefully because it deserves that. Bernard Loiseau arrived at La Côte d'Or in Soleure in 1975, the same restaurant that Alexandre Dumas had made legendary. He took it over in 1982 and spent the next 9 years in single-minded pursuit of one thing, a third Michelin star. He got it in 1991, and the New York Times put him on the front page. Through the 80s and 90s, he became one of the most charismatic and media-savvy chefs in France, expanding his brand, opening Paris restaurants, and in 1998 becoming the first chef in the world to be listed on the stock exchange. He was, by any measure, at the very top of his profession. And then in 2003, the Gorg Milor Guide downgraded his restaurant. A prominent critic published a sharp attack in Le Figaro, and rumors began to circulate, incorrectly as it turned out, that his third Michelin star might be at risk. On the 24th of February in 2003, he died by suicide at his home. He was 52. His wife, Dominique, has spoken since about his struggle with bipolar disorder and has been clear that the full picture of what he was carrying was more complex than any single event. The restaurant still bears his name. It still operates today. If you've ever seen the Pixar film Ratatouille, then you've already encountered Bernard Loiseau. The character of Chef Auguste Gusteau, the celebrated French chef whose story drives the entire film, was inspired significantly by him, his fame, his charisma, his relationship with the crushing pressure of stars, and his fate. Maybe the next time you watch that movie, you might see it a little bit differently knowing this. If you'd like a little more fabulously delicious between episodes, come and join me on Instagram. I'm at Andrew Pryor Fabulously. That's where I share bite-sized French food history, fun facts, behind-the-scenes moments, and plenty of everyday life in France. It's the perfect little snack between podcast courses. And if you prefer to watch the podcast as well as listen, then you can find full video episodes over on YouTube. Same stories, same deliciousness, just with my face attached. More food, more stories, and more fabulous. Come join the party. It's très scrollable, some would say. Et voila, that's the end of today's episode of Fabulously Delicious. If this episode made you hungry, happy, or suddenly Googling barges on the Canal de Bourgogne, parfait. If you enjoyed it, leave a review, share it with a fellow food lover, and come say bonjour. I always love hearing from you. And if you liked this one, there's plenty more to explore. I've done full episodes on Bœuf Bourguignon with Oliver Cafis, the story of Pain d'Épices, here with the wonderful Tanisha Townsend. Search for any of them on whatever platform you're listening right now. Until next time, eat well, stay curious, and whatever you do it fabulously. Merci beaucoup, bon app, et à très bientôt.